It's my absolute pleasure to introduce the SAFAR Social. So this is a bit of an experiment, as the whole festival has been really, but we just wanted to kind of bring together these four amazing documentary makers for a discussion about the form and about what they're up to, and just kind of like let's see where it goes really. As ever, it would be great if people could keep their microphones on mute throughout the discussion, but we really encourage you all to use the chat box and kind of jump in with any comments that you have and questions throughout. And Elhum, who's our chair, will be able to either kind of address them at the end, or if she thinks it's particularly relevant, we can kind of jump in and have a conversation on that as well. So I'll leave her to do the introductions of everybody else, but I just wanted to thank Elhum Shakerifar. She is a BAFTA nominated producer and winner of the 2017 Women in Film and TV's BBC Factual Award. She's also one of Screen International's 2018 Brit 50 Producers on the Rise. So Elhum has been a friend of the festival for a number of years, and so we're really, really happy that she's able to be chairing one of the sessions tonight, not least because we needed to give Rabia, our curator, a night off. So I'll hand over to Elhum, and she can take it from there, please.
Oh, thank you so much, Becky. It's really nice to be here and to be part of the festival in this way, and nice to see many faces that I know, but also lots of other people that I guess maybe we'll get a chance to hear from in the course of this discussion. Well, let me start by introducing our amazing panel of directors, but also just to say that we wanted this to be a very open and fluid discussion about storytelling very broadly, and we'll try and keep it as open as possible. So these are very, I suppose what I wanted to say at the beginning is that I think we always introduce ourselves in very kind of formatted ways that kind of connect back to the institutions that we've worked with or specific things we've made, but we're much bigger than that, and all of those big things that feed into the work that we're doing are the things that we never have space to discuss, and that I'd really love to spend some time with in this space. So let's see how we go. But so we're joined by Naziha Arebi, a British-Libyan filmmaker and artist working at the intersection between art and activism, centering identity, gender, and reconciliation. She is the director of BAFTA-nominated feature film Freedom Fields and is developing her first hybrid fiction feature. Yasmin Fedda is an award-winning filmmaker and artist whose recent films include Ayuni and Queens of Syria. Her films have been BAFTA nominated and screened at numerous international film festivals, including Sundance and Edinburgh, and have screened at galleries. And Basma Khalifa is Sudanese, raised in Northern Ireland and Scotland, multidisciplinary creative living in London. Across all her creative outlets, Basma believes in creating and telling stories about and for the underrepresented youth of our generation. Films include Ramadan for Facebook, A Ramadan Poem, and Inside the Real Saudi Arabia for BBC Three. So welcome, Naziha, Yasmin, and Basma. And I suppose I'll start by asking a question about, I mean, we're 6 months into a very strange time. And I always, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I'd always say, you know, as documentary filmmakers, we're used to things not going to plan, but this year has really been something else. And so I just wanted to ask, maybe to start, how you are and where you find your grounding, and what your what's been your solace in this strange time. It's quite a kind of open starting point. I don't know who'd like to start with that.
Hi, I'm happy to start. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I mean, it's an interesting question, because even you were saying how we present ourselves, and, you know, I mean, I'm still a filmmaker, but I haven't been an acting filmmaker in the last 6 months. I've released a film, Ayuni, that Elhum also produced. But my day-to-day life is not as a filmmaker for the most part, and that's been kind of interesting to kind of figure out what that means. My day-to-day life I mean, I still have ideas popping out of my mind, probably like everyone, but not able to necessarily realize all of them because of other restrictions around me. Like, I have a child, so there's been a lot more childcare than there used to be. There's a lot more need for it. And so, you know, my solace in this time has also been nothing to do with filmmaking. It's actually been swimming. It's been going outside and being inspired by other things. And I guess it's kind of interesting because it's like finding the balance between those things and still finding what filmmaking means within that kind of at the moment.
It's interesting, the thing you were saying about you're a filmmaker, but this time in which, you know, we haven't been doing the thing that often identifies us or we see as identifying ourselves. And yeah, at the beginning of lockdown, I was, we were re-editing a film for about 8 weeks, 10 weeks, something like that, across kind of different places. So that felt very intensive. But at the same time, I wasn't being out with a camera, I wasn't being around, I wasn't meeting people, and that kind of felt like a loss. So when we finished that editing process, I definitely felt the need to, I don't know, slow down and I don't know, engage with things in a way that was really slow, and yeah, reconnect back with kind of nature, not running and being that person that everyone expects all the time to get back at like 12, 1, 2, 3 in the morning because that's what's expected of you or that's what's known of you, and just kind of slowing down, I think. And yeah, and finding joy or seeking story in places or spaces you wouldn't usually, and not therefore just being defined by, oh, I make films in this region, or I make films about these sorts of people. It was actually more being opened up to, okay, how can I see that, even if that's not usually what I do. And so, yeah, it was definitely a time that I have never had before, I suppose, like many people here, to just slow down and just go, actually, what do I see? What do I want to be? How do I want to, you know, play and experiment in my work? So yeah, I suppose that was a solace in a way. Don't know, yeah.
I think for me, lockdown has actually been really busy. Somehow don't really know how that's happened, but I have barely had room to breathe. I think the weird thing about lockdown is even though you get all this time alone because you're not out with people, people almost expect you to be very like on call because you're not doing that commuting time or you can't really make up for things. So it's Zoom calls back to back to back. And somehow I started lockdown as a filmmaker, we had lots of documentary ideas I was going to film this year and film next year, and somehow over lockdown I've also become a director. So I've just directed a short for Apple, and I have written for every magazine possible and newspaper possible over the space of Ramadan. I ended up doing quite a lot of content. So weirdly, it's it's been overwhelmingly busy, and I think actually what I probably struggled with the most is working and living and breathing and doing everything in your bedroom is quite tricky because you don't get to get away from that space. And as a creative, I think probably most creatives realize that is the trickiest thing about being creative is you need to consume other energy to think of things and to think of ideas. So I found actually being alone sometimes difficult because that engagement with people is when you're like, oh, that's a great idea, or that's a good thought. You don't get that on Zoom calls. And also before lockdown, we didn't have Zoom, so we didn't have to see people's faces all the time. But somehow now everyone wants to do video calls. So yeah, the Zoom fatigue is real. But I'm, you know, privileged beyond belief that I've not struggled during lockdown. I've been very, very lucky to still have work.
I like what you say about like consuming each other's energies and this idea of collaboration. And of course, we've adapted collaboration in this time. But I wondered whether you could all reflect on spaces of collaboration and how that's key to your work.
I mean, I guess, go from there. For me, I think because everything I kind of do involves either young people, especially the things I'm directing now, pretty much all Gen Z projects. I found in my space collaborating, whether it's being a director or being in front of the camera, quite imperative to let people know where I stand and how I stand and what I agree with. My documentary that I made for BBC Three, I forcibly was like, I am going to be in this edit every day, and I'm the one who's going to write the subtitles, because I know these subtitles are going to be wrong if you let someone else do them, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I want the sign off. And I had these contracts that were like, no one is signing off anything until I say it can be signed off, because this is my family and my livelihood and my language. And in that sense, that level of collaboration for me is super important, because if I'm going to put a message across that I'm fully going to stand behind, and sure that I can sort of say to my peers or even people above me, my execs or whatever, and say, no, I need you to trust me. I know what I'm doing in this part, and then I can consume from you what I don't know. So I think it's been a lot of me learning, especially as a first-time director. I've learned a lot about learning off my team. Directing this short for Apple was tricky for me, because I was like, there's so much I don't know, and I don't really understand how they came to me anyway, and were like, we want you to direct this piece, we think you'd be great. And I was like, I don't know how you think that, I've never directed anything before, but okay. So kind of like convincing yourself that you're like imposter syndrome, okay, I can do this, but having a team around you who can be like, okay, this is her first go at this, but she's technically the boss at this, so let's support her while also listening to her and collaborating in that sense. I think it's been summer's been a huge learning curve in listening and being able to put your hands up and saying, hey, I actually don't really know what I'm doing here. I don't know what VAT is. I don't know how to charge VAT. Yes, I should put that on my invoice. So yeah, listening to the team around you and not acting like you're, just because it's your job and your gig. It's all about you, I guess.
I think that space of listening basically never ends. I think that's what you learn when you work with people, essentially, that there's never going to be one way of doing things. I don't know whether, obviously Yaz and I worked together most recently and released a film over the summer, so we've had a long collaboration. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Yaz, but let's talk about collaboration.
Put me on the spot, yeah. I actually love collaboration. I think it's the best way to make anything, especially films, because they are like collective endeavors. Even if you are a director, I mean, unless you're just doing everything on your own, filming and editing, it is a group effort, like every layer of it. And I think it's really good to just embrace that. It's really, really good. And I don't know, I kind of see it like an adventure game, and you're on a team and you just have to figure out how you're jumping from this rock to that one, because you don't always figure it out by yourself, And I think, I don't know, working with Elhum, we had so many like challenges, and actually I'm really happy to hear, Basma, you've had a good lockdown in terms of work, because I've had the total opposite, and I'm almost on the 15 years of making film and not able to get much support to make more. So I'm glad someone's getting some work out there, But that also means that like the collaboration is really important, because that's how you get longevity in relationships, And the last film we did just had so many kinds of challenges, from funding to just kind of realizing what it looked like. It's about forcible disappearance and love in Syria, and it was filmed over a 7-year period. So it was a really long relationship, and we're still friends at the end of it. But I think collaboration is just good, because it just sparks ideas, and I hope that I can continue to find ways to do that. And I'm actually working on a new project, a small project, with a friend of mine who I've worked with many years but haven't recently, and it's just nice to sort of, he's got a project, he's working with poets, some Afghan poets and filmmakers, and we're working together as a team to come up with this like weird, crazy, experimental poetry exchange and film exchange between everyone. And it was just really refreshing to just be like, okay, how insane can we do this project? So we're just having this sort of like letter writing poetry project across continents, and it's quite exciting. And I think, I might have come up with that by myself, but it's just nice to have someone from a completely different background to just come together and come up with a new thing, together.
Who placed the bar at how insane?
I don't know, because that collaborator, it's Ryan Van Winkle, who's a poet and a performance artist. I mean, he puts it quite high, but then he was like, do you think that's crazy enough? And then we'll be like, maybe we can do that too, So it's just like playing off each other and then seeing what lands. And then the filmmakers we're working with are up for it too. So that's a good start. They're up for the collaboration.
So yeah, the collaboration thing. I think that's maybe something that I've really missed a lot in lockdown and not just in the edit room, for example, like, you know, when you're in the edit and you're there and you're bouncing off the walls and you're throwing ideas back and forth to each other and you're like trying things and playing, and I love that so much. And I like that when that goes right and then you bring those people with you into new projects and then you know each other deeper and relationships enable you to challenge each other even further. And like, I love it when someone pulls me up and be like, what are you on about? That's ridiculous. Or me pulling that person up, or just to have that sort of relationship where you can just be like, no, or oh my God, yes. And all the bits in between. But I also really enjoy the collaboration with the people that are in the films that I make. I think often people like to present this idea of, you know, I'm the auteur and these are my subjects, and like, I don't know, there's this kind of idea of that I think that you lose something of this beauty of the collaboration with these people whose lives will be in this film forever, and they give that energy to you and you give back to them, and it kind of forms a film together in a way. And so I really love that process, and I love how that's this three-way thing, me, the camera and them, and we're all collaborating in some strange triangle that you can't quite name, but it's magic. And I think allowing for that, you know, not thinking you go in with your ideas when you go to shoot, but then just being completely open that something might just swing it the other way, and being totally open to that collaboration or that surprise or that element that you hadn't planned for. And I like making sure I'm ready for that, because I think that's where the kind of really exciting, for me, joy happens when I'm in the field with the camera.
Yeah, I always think of documentary as placing a frame around a reality. So essentially, it's all of these things that you've all talked about. You know, there's both this side of the permission, really, because you need to build that relationship to feel that you have the permission to do that, but also a responsibility and also a kind of a frame, and you need to figure out where to place that frame, because reality itself doesn't have one, essentially. And then just maybe going back to this idea of permission, I suppose it kind of came out of both what Basma and Yasmin was saying most specifically, but also in relation to working with collaborators and kind of representing people often at, you know, either longitudinally over a long period of time, so you're witness to many things and to changes, or around specific turning points, because essentially that is the kind of classical driver of you know, emotion or change or transformation that you might then capture within the space of a film. And I wondered whether you could reflect on this kind of notion of permission, and also kind of how you place your frame and how you feel that you have, like, and around the kind of notion of responsibility around that. It's quite a kind of like multi-part question, I guess. You can take it however makes most sense to you. And
I'm happy to start with that, because I think the one thing, I mean, I've made like 3 long films and a few short films over the years, and the thing I always find really interesting and fascinating and still a bit mind-boggling is that the people I've met who will collaborate with me to make a film, like the subjects in my films, the camera, I mean, they're into having the camera provoke that relationship, you know, like straight away. And I don't know why it still surprises me, because I don't know if I would be the same if someone was pointing the camera the other way. And I think it's really interesting that the camera can create that excuse and that magic to kind of go somewhere, and nobody really knows where it's going, but we're all up for sort of going on that journey together. But I think also that process is part of that trust building that eventually lets, you know, the responsibility for it comes through the relationship. And I think the camera is a really important part of building that relationship. Yeah, it's still something I still think about. I'm like, how does this happen? How does this happen? Like, you know, in my last film, I met the sister of a priest who's in the film who had been kidnapped and disappeared. And I'd never met her. And it was like so interesting that turning a camera on when I met her, also by chance, I wasn't expecting to meet her. I'd gone to meet some of the community of this priest in Iraq who lived in Syria. And, you know, she was coming unexpectedly, so I stayed on to meet her. And, you know, straight away she's like, yeah, let's have an interview, you know. So I sat down and interviewed with her, and she, like, a few months later was like, thank you so much for that. Nobody sat me down and just asked me these questions. You know, it was like she wanted to do that but didn't know, and was very happy when the kind of opportunity came up. And I think that's something really special, you know, that we should hold and appreciate what you can do, I guess, when you're in that situation.
I think for me, when it comes to that, it's all about respect, permission. And I think especially because I filmed in Saudi Arabia at a time when the country's going through a transition, and they had the case of the journalists and all these things were happening at and it was very, very heightened time of being there. And obviously as a filmmaker, you want to make sure that you're talking to people on the ground and you're getting their viewpoints on things and your viewpoints and everything else. But I think to the utmost, I went out on that journey with that documentary to make sure that I didn't want anyone from Saudi Arabia to have the same narrative that they've been given. And I think what you need to do when you go into those spaces is respect that they have their viewpoints on things, that even if you maybe don't agree with, or different people who are viewing it don't agree with, you can still respect that people have different views. I mean, I got into filmmaking in the first place because I used to watch documentaries and just be so frustrated that I felt that so many of these Arab countries are just so misrepresented. Yes, a bunch of them are quite corrupt, or they go through things, or things that we don't agree with, which a lot of the Western world and probably America does as well. But, you know, the Arab world does get a bad rap. And I always wanted to go to these places to just sort of not change that narrative, but give a different perspective on that narrative. And I think you, as a, you know, when you're front of camera, like I was in that doc, I think giving them the space to sort of speak their mind and speak their truth. And obviously you sort of, you know, push it forward and push the conversation and ask those inquisitive questions, but it's being respectful. And through being respectful, you inherently get the permission to find out what you want to find anyway. I think when you go in all guns blazing, that's when you're never going to get anything that you want to get. You give them the space to tell their narrative. And I think with everything that I make, I try and make sure that I am not putting my impression or anyone else's impression in anyone's mouths. I think great filmmaking is when you allow other people to sort of speak their truth. And I think that's what permission is. It's giving them permission to just sort of say what they want to say.
How does the notion of permission sit with you, Naziha?
Well, I think I suppose I might fast forward it to the edit space of when you've built this relationship and you have this amazing trust and this permission to film things, and like Yas said, like, I don't think I'd ever want to be in a documentary ever. I can't imagine why anyone would want to be. But I mean, I can imagine, but I would never want to be. But I suppose different people have their different reasons. But the fact that when a camera's there and you are not only given that permission, but life unfolds as though it's not even there sometimes. Of course, it provokes and it is there, but the fact that people will be, and especially when you're doing these films over a long period of time, and then they, you know, for example, with Freedom Films, the women in the film, they completely, absolutely 100% trusted me to do whatever I wanted with the film. They let me film everything. And then because they knew that when it came to the edit, that I had this relationship with them and this trust that I would not put anything in that film that put them in danger. I would not put anything in that film that was controversial, that it would upset their lives or their families, or and even though I would have filmed some things that definitely would not go in the film, there was just a trust. So when it came to like screening the film, I was like, do you guys want to see it first, or do you want to see it in the cinema? And they all like voted that they wanted to see it in the cinema, because there was this trust and this permission that they felt that, well, whatever you do, we know it's going to be like, it's going to be us. And which is really nerve-wracking and kind of like, fuck. Sorry, am I allowed to swear? I just swear, sorry. But I think there's that thing of, I think it's going in, like as I said, with that respect of what someone's allowing you to come into, and totally kind of respecting that, and it being a two-way thing, like letting somebody into your vulnerability as well as you into theirs, because otherwise the power dynamic is, you know, completely like this. So yeah.
Well, this is an interesting time to really think about this power dynamic specifically. I think we're seeing like there's a lot of discussion at the moment. There's been a real reckoning that the Black Lives Matters movement is creating, well, lots of different types of discussions and lots of different types of reckonings. And I think for those of us who really recognize what the power of representation is and the power of kind of authorship is, and kind of thinking about it more broadly as well, it's not just about who's making and what you're focusing on and how it's made, it's about lots of other things like you know, accountability within teams, for example, who has editorial control or ownership even. You know, you might anyway, not to kind of go on, but there are lots of different ramifications. I wonder whether each of you could reflect on that space of power specifically, and where you feel within it as well, because this is also a moment where I think certain perspectives are sought out, but maybe not necessarily on the terms that you might want to kind of engage with certain spaces, or maybe not. If that makes sense. You don't have to answer in the order that you've all answered. You can take any bit of that. They're all kind of big questions.
Yeah, and I think with the thing to do with ownership, I mean, I'm sure most people here have probably read the Reckoning, that article was about kind of ownership and accountability and things like this, and that really struck a chord, I felt, of something that I remember having like a discussion with a production company that I'm no longer really working with, but this issue of ownership of a film and the protagonists in the film, maybe us having some of the profit share go towards something, towards the situation that they were currently dealing with. It's a film that's about to come out, but and there was a kind of ethical discussion about absolutely not, because then they're kind of you know, are they paid actors or something then, or whatever, but and I was like, absolutely not. It's more the fact that this is part of their lives and they're not being paid, but if there is a place for them within profit share to go towards something for their children, then I think that's makes their ownership of the film also something that is I don't know. And this was a conversation that I felt was quite tense, but fast forwarding, it feels that it's something that somebody gives their time and their lives, and they're open with you. And I'm not saying you pay those people, but I do think that there should be some exchange in a way, because otherwise the power is completely off. Like, not that, you know, documentary filmmakers make any money, but I just think there's something to do with the power in that. So like with Freedom Fields, for example, we use the film Loads to kind of raise money for their NGO, and therefore they felt it was their film because they were using their film as a tool to fundraise for their NGO. So that's also the ownership of it wasn't like, oh, Naziha's film, it's our film. I'm wittering on a bit, but it's just something that has been whizzing around in my brain a lot about the ethics and the line that we draw, and where we can be malleable with who owns what, and especially people who are in films, and play with that and challenge it. But I didn't have an answer there, sorry Elhum, but it's just some thoughts that have been going like this for a while.
No, but it's true. And I think, I suppose I ask these questions also because there are actually no rules. And if this is a time where we could potentially rewrite some rules, I feel like sometimes even just putting ideas out there is a good start.
Yeah.
And it might be that it kind of bolsters or kind of gives ideas, or kind of even creates discussions around what's possible. I don't know if either of you wanted to reflect on that too.
Yeah, I think,
Go on,
yeah, go
Yasmin.
ahead, Basma.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
I mean, I think it's really great to think about those things explicitly and upfront when you're making a film, because I've not necessarily done that with other films. It's sort of been an evolving process to understand what and how, and I think talking out these questions is really good. I just want to add, again, it's not really an answer, it's just questions, but I think spaces of power still have a lot to do with the industry, gatekeepers to the industry, access to funding and distribution, because it's something I have struggled with, and I've realized I need to articulate it more, because it's something that's not gotten easier, unfortunately, and I can't figure out all the reasons why, you know, like, but it is the situation I find myself in, which I find strange. Like, how can you work in an industry for 15 years and for it to not get easier? Like, I don't understand, you know? And I mean, there are lots of things there, but I just want to put that out there, and I think it's probably a good time to be talking about these things to help us work out, you know, how do we work together? How do we find these spaces, support, solidarity, funding, whatever? But, you know, and it might be different experiences for the two of you, I don't know, but I just wanted to put that one out there as well.
I think for me, my experience is so different because my documentary was made with the BBC. So I almost made it with the gatekeepers. So in terms of funding and stuff, that obviously wasn't an issue because it gets funded by the BBC. But what comes with that is knowing that they are the gatekeepers. So it's sort of putting the stance on what is non-negotiables and what is things that you're willing to sort of bend a little bit for. You can't go in, I think with anything when you make it with a big corp, you can't go in being like, absolutely not, can't do this, won't do that, won't do this. But I stuck to the things that really, really mattered to me. So like in my documentary, like my aunts, like, even though I said wear clothes, cover up, you want to be modest, they obviously didn't because they were in their homes. And I was like, everyone's arms have to be blurred, everyone's chests have to be blurred, even if they're wearing tops, it doesn't matter. If you can see their bodies, they're not going to want that. Everyone, you know, like there was so many negotiating points that I had to make to them. And as I said earlier about the subtitles, there was a subtitles thing, and they were like, yeah, this is kind of what they say. And I was like, no, if I'm an Arab speaker and I speak Arabic and I know that's not exactly what they said, that line can't run. So let's just put in their exact words. So those are the things I negotiated on. But then obviously there's things that, you know, I don't know if I would have ever, and I do know, I would have never called it Inside the Real Saudi Arabia. That title, I was fine Turkey, and then but I had to negotiate sort of like, okay, well, it's kind of we kind of pay for this, so we're going to call it what we want to call it. So you kind of have to find little negotiating points. And I think for me, I always said that it was most imperative that I protected the people in the film. And as long as they're protected, the things like a title that's catchy, that gets people watching, or the length or the talking points or whatever. But I think when you do work with the gatekeepers, I'd say my best piece of advice is with your team, with my exec, with my production company, I went into it being like, hey guys, here's my list of non-negotiables. I will honestly just not film this if these things happen, and I will make sure that's in my contract that I want to sign this all off. So I think that's how I've learned to manage the gatekeepers. But I definitely think when you're self-funding and you're doing things by yourself, yes, you have more creativity and more freedom to create. But obviously then it becomes more of an issue of distribution and getting it out. And my documentary ended up being distributed all around the world, which I didn't know happened because I never made a documentary. So I'd say on reflection, I would like to be part of that process and know where it's going and when it's going out, so that when my socials blow up, I know that it's just shown in Denmark and it's just shown in Germany, and these things I didn't know that I would have liked to be part of. But I think that, as both the other ladies said, when you sort of, I come from such a different place because I've always gone to the gatekeeper and they've always given me the kind of opportunity, and even going forward, everything I make will probably be for BBC or Channel 4, so I don't have the issue of creating. But it's also difficult because you have to stand your ground. And standing your ground against middle-aged British white men who are the gatekeepers is it's not an easy ground. So it's about finding what's most important to you, I think.
That's interesting, because you brought up your red lines, which I think is always really important as a producer. I always think about this, like, within, as a producer, but I think within the teams, it's always really important to know what your red lines are, what shouldn't be crossed, what's a kind of no-go area. But on the other side of that, I think there's also what's your North Star and what it is that kind of really drives you and what motivates you and what is the thing that you do, that you tell stories for. And I'd love to hear from each of you about what those things are, what your drivers are.
I'd say during lockdown was trying to work out, I think but trying to work out and dissect what that thing is, what this North Star is. And it's often like an injustice or an unrepresented something or an underdog something, or something that just makes me go and then I transform that into like and then kind of but there has to be that initial like for me to be propelled and bothered enough to stick with something for so long that's so difficult, that's you're gonna be, most of the time you're not going to be in that situation, which actually it should be more like that, and that's but most of the time you're not, you're going to be getting no, and you've got to just love this thing so much that you've got to get up again and get up again and get up again and reapply and reapply and reapply, and also be like, I think when I first started like pitching and stuff or going into meetings, like feeling a little bit like, oh, here's this thing, but actually now feeling a bit more like, here's this thing I'm gonna do anyway. I know it's freaking brilliant, and if you're not on board, then it's kind of your loss. And kind of, having that in my head a little bit more and feeling a little bit more like less desperate and less like, even if I am financially desperate, but actually knowing that the thing I have is pretty damn good. And if you don't get it, then it doesn't really matter, and I'll find someone who does get it. So feeling that a bit more and a bit more weight in that, I think, has been something that I suppose has come with time. But it all still comes back to the if you don't get my I don't even know if I really want to do this with you. So yeah, I don't know, I'm speaking noises, sorry.
I have the same feeling though, like if I don't give a shit that much about something, I don't think I would be able to feel, if I wouldn't get that propulsion to keep going. And I think that sums it up. Either you're angry about something, you think something's really cool, you want the world to know about something,
Or really beautiful, if something's so beautiful. Like.
Exactly. And I mean, the really beautiful thing about filmmaking is you actually meet such amazing people sometimes, or really strange situations, and you're just like, let's put this out there. I think more people should know about this. More people should talk about it, engage with it. There's something really inspiring about that. So yeah, it's the same. I think that's a good, we should turn it into a word.
We'll write an essay on and it will just be just noises. Yeah.
I kind of agree with, I agree with both of you. I think for me, as much as I'm like, yeah, the gatekeepers gave me the opportunity, I got rejected. That documentary got rejected, I think 4 to 5 times over the space of 2.5 years. It always became a why her, why now, why her, why now, which is always the reason. And I was like, I don't know how many times I can tell you why now, for the fact that it's it was where I was born, and I could be the one that can tell the story, and I'm Arabic speaking, and it's on my passport, and like I just kept finding like whys and why nows, and I kept going. They were like, we don't know, and I think that rejection gets really frustrating. And even now, yes, I made 1 documentary, but you think getting a second commission is easy because you got 1 commission, but that's not how it works. It's because you did 1 great thing doesn't mean you're going to get a second great thing. But I think, to what both of you just said, when you truly get that kind of like, I know this is a story and I know this is a powerful story, it's sitting with that. So the Saudi idea was like, I know this is a story. So whether it gets made now in a month or it gets made now in 5 years, I know it's a story. So I'm going to keep going with this. And if you guys eventually don't want to do it, I'll just do it. And that's definitely what I'm doing now. I think, you spend so much time pitching and it does get a bit relentless. You have to get to the point where you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to self-fund this, and I'm going to do what I can do to sort of do this my way, and I'd rather people turn around and be like, we want to buy this and distribute it, than do it the gatekeepers way, which is waiting for them to give you the funds. So if you can self-fund it, it's amazing. But I always think just when you're really passionate about something and you can justify it to yourself, that it's so much easier to justify it to everyone else. Because with every time someone's like, what? You can be like, well, let me give you a list of why nots. And I think as long as you can give me a list of, you can give someone a list of why nots, then they have no reason to sort of doubt your ability to do something.
Interesting. I really want to read this essay that you're talking about, Naziha.
The one
the one that you need to write. The one about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like the driver feels like it's also a lot of rage, and it's like kind of correcting imbalances in a sense in actually everything that you're all saying. And I wondered whether there are also spaces of joy, like spaces that have also surprised you, maybe like allyship that you hadn't quite expected, or that kind of that enabled you in a way, and or maybe things that that basically bolster you but you hadn't quite expected from that space. I think we'll come back to this question of gatekeepers, and there's also some questions about that. But before thinking about what holds us back, I'd love to think about what propels us forwards from the outside as well. Even though sometimes it feels like, you know, it's few and far between and difficult.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that propels me is I actually really love the art and craft of making film. Like, I love making films, you know, and that's why I want to put my rage or my joy through film, because that's how I like to make things and express things. And actually the first short I made was in a bakery in Edinburgh that was part run by adults with learning disabilities. And that place I actually worked in first and then made a film about. And it was like the most inspiring space and location to be in, because there was so much like fun in labor kind of in the way the place worked. And I think like that, I guess that planted the seed in me of the like joy of filmmaking, is like when you find an amazing energy, there's something beautiful about trying to capture it in film and sharing it with other people. And every film will have a different subject, but I think that's, if you can find that, that's something really special. I don't know, and kind of gives you the positivity to kind of keep going with the hard, long slog sometimes, you know, because you still give a shit about the thing that you're making that takes 10 years. But, you know, you need that sort of seed of joy in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just add that film Bread Makers is absolutely one of my favorite films, and I've shown it every single class I've ever taught. I have shown Bread Makers because it's just beautiful, and so much about it is so, you know, the soundscape, the kind of the way that it was made, the all the different characters that you learn, that you meet, and there's almost no talking at all in the film at all even, and it's just wonderful, and I really recommend you check it out.
Thank you. That makes me happy. It lives. You know.
We should put a link in the chat thing so people can find it.
I'll do that now.
That's my acting, sorry.
I think Becky's just done that.
Yay.
And Saeed, thank you.
I think for me, oh sorry.
No, go.
I think for me, obviously, I think for you ladies, it's because you're actually physically shooting and physically filming, and I obviously don't do that. I just like listening to people talk. I just think it's really, really fascinating that there is not one single human being in the world that has been through the exact same experience as another person. Like, no one. You will not find anyone that will have any sort of experience that you've had. So whatever you talk to, whoever you talk to, every single day of your life, you sort of get a different perspective on something. And I think that's the most fascinating thing about filmmaking, that you're just, that sort of like that thing that happens that you're like, huh, hadn't seen that. I didn't think of it that way. And as long as I keep having that aha moment and being like, I didn't think about that. I think that's what great filmmaking is. And I think that's what great storytelling is, that you as the storyteller, as the filmmaker, need to be challenged. Your thought process needs to be challenged, because then that's, I guess, how you interpret what you see and how you see it. Because if you're challenged by it, then how do you challenge the audience to feel the same way? So I think for me, it all comes down to different perspectives and showcasing different perspectives, even if I don't agree with them, and making sure that that perspective is given enough air and room to breathe, so that people walk away from it thinking, I think if I ever watch anything, I watch so many documentaries, and if I ever watch anything, I always want to walk away from it being like, okay, and I want to think about that, or I want to talk to someone about that. Like, who can I find? I need to get someone to watch this so we can talk about it. That, I think, is incredible filmmaking.
Yeah, the room to breathe thing, I like when something's not forced down your throat, when there's space around, like something has multiple layers, and someone can take away one thing from a film and someone can take away a completely different thing just from their own lived experience of how they interpret what they've just received. And I think I like watching films like that have nuance and subtlety and lots of layers, but I also really love trying to make work like that. And I think because we have this kind of industry or this world or this Netflix thing where you're scrolling up and there's 10 million things, like we're more and more being forced to make things simplified and easy, and you know, and I think it kind of lacks a respect for audiences, because I think people can understand complex and complicated and nuanced, and I think it's just people have this fear that the scrolling mentality, you might lose people. But I think people have space for, you know, wanting to fall into another world, and I think maybe giving audiences a bit of credit that, you know, people can engage. So yeah, sorry, yeah, the thing about space and breathe around something, I really... What was the original question, Elhum?
I don't really remember. I was just thinking, audiences. I always find that in our industry, people are like, we need to engage new audiences. And I'm like, there are no new audiences. There are just new ways of telling stories. It's just that it's being dominated by the same group of people, and that they don't speak to everyone, I guess. I realized...
Oh, the positive thing. Sorry, I just realized.
Joy,
the allyship, the joy, yes. So
allyship, yes.
The
if you have an
allyship,
example of that.
just like, I remember really early on with Freedom Fields, when I was just starting out, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I remember I applied for production when I should have been applying for development, but I got the fund. And I said to the person, you know, I didn't really, sorry, I made a mistake there. And they were like, we knew you made a mistake, but like, we believed in what you were doing. And like, just having those people that will forgive your naivety sometimes, especially if it's at the beginning of you starting out, but will believe in the vision that you have despite you not understanding initially how the industry works. Or and I have to say, and this is not like, you know, me being sexist or something, the majority of those people who have handed me a hand have been women who have been working in the field for some time, whether that be filmmakers themselves or people who are on kind of funds or whatever. Like, people, yeah, there are good people. I mean, I often find myself like harping on about damn gatekeepers and like these white middle class men that are just making everything and controlling everything, and then kind of at the same time realizing there are lots of people in the industry that I really love and I've learned so much from. So that's one thing, the joy thing. Like, I've met some brilliant people who have been willing to open a door, and that makes you want to also turn around and open a door. So yeah, like a revolving door. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Sorry to cut you. It's funny when it's like women do give opportunities and give opportunities to each other. My documentary was made by a Dutch man, a white Dutch man, and he literally, I messaged him on LinkedIn and said, I have an idea, I want to talk to you. And he was like, come in tomorrow and talk to me. And I called in sick. I hope no one's watching this. I called in sick to my job and went and met him 3 years ago. They will remember. I went and met him, and he was the only person in the 20 to 30 to 40 people that was like, I'm going to take a chance on this girl. And he had no reason to. I had no proof that I could do it. I didn't have any catalogue of films. I didn't have any catalogue of having even been on screen except for like a YouTube and my Instagram. But it does always just actually, for anyone who's just starting, it does take just that one person. And even if you email or talk to 100 people, there will always be that one person who's like, I've got a feeling about her. and we're gonna run with this, and we're gonna keep going. And even until now, like when I talk to him, I'm like, you gave me a career. When no one wanted to listen, you're the person that gave me a career. So it will always take, it only ever takes one person to sort of make your dream come true, and that person isn't necessarily the gatekeeper who lives at a commissioning office or at a channel. It can be that small time person that has a small office but can just front your kind of idea and kind of push it forward for you. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not always, gatekeepers aren't always as big and huge as they have to be. And the joy, if you can spark joy in just one person in your idea, that's all it takes. Like all my productions of anything I've ever done are little small tiny teams of 3 or 4 people. And actually I pretty much have only worked with men. So even meeting female filmmakers, I'm like, oh, there's women, cool. I didn't even know there was women in this industry. I always feel like I'm just like rolling around trying to find women to work with. So there are men, there's a lot of them that are tricky, but you just to find a few that are good. While we're still in a male dominated place, I don't ever want anyone to feel like, oh, because there's so many men, we're not going to get anywhere. There are good men, but there's just brilliant women. And if you can't find the women, find the brilliant men first of all to get to the brilliant women sometimes. That's how I feel.
I think maybe picking up on that, it would be interesting to reflect, I guess, on the revolving door as well, and like the intentionality of who you work with and who you give opportunities to, because we all have that space within the work that we do. The realization that we are also, you know, like we could be that one person for someone else, and thinking about the ways that we can impact in thinking, who do we choose to work with, who do we open doors for, and how do we open those doors. That's kind of like a question and a comment, because I'm also quite conscious of time, and there are a couple of questions here. I don't know if there are other questions that people want to write into the chat, but I'll just read this one out about the question of gatekeepers, and I think it does speak to this notion of access on whose terms, I guess, and just reflecting on that a little more. I think it speaks to the reality that all of us have to deal with, I suppose, in relation to what we can be keys to as filmmakers, because of background, because of knowledge, because of languages, and thinking about the terms on which you make films. You can read the full questions in the chat around access, but making on your own terms. I wondered whether you could reflect on that. And if anyone else has a question, there is 5 minutes for questions. You can write them in the chat.
I think for me, the gatekeepers thing with access, they just want it for access. Yeah, they probably do, but if I can give them the access so that I can tell a story that needs to be told, then fine, have the access, is kind of how I see it. Like, giving them the access doesn't deny the story that needs to be told. And if the story can be told by me, who's the person who can tell the story properly, then everyone wins. They kind of get the access, and I get to tell the story in the way I feel like the story needs to be told. So I don't necessarily think you need to look at access as like a negative word, because it still allows you to tell a narrative in that part of the world that maybe you wouldn't be able to get out as far and wide had you not given them the access. So it's a bit of a give it. It's who came first, the chicken or the egg? You know, you kind of have to give and take in this one, and say, fine, I'll give it to them, but then that means I get to do what I want to do. So I don't necessarily think access, only if you've given it to them and walked away and let them do whatever they wanted with it, then maybe that's the problem. But I think it allows you to tell the narrative, as long as you make sure that you put your foot down and say, I'm going to tell this narrative.
Yeah, making sure you have sign off on a final cut. I think, like, it's, you know, otherwise it doesn't matter if you're the one that's gone and shot it. It doesn't matter if you've been in the edit. If you're not there in that vote on the final cut, then I think if it's someone who is coming to you for the access, because I don't know, I mean, it's slightly different, I think, because making films slightly differently, I think, than the person who wrote the thing wrote, but I think it's still that thing of finding ways to tell the stories, but making sure you still get to tell it in your way, even if you're wrapping it up and making them think it's something that they're, I don't know, that they're a part of. I think it's still, as long as you get to have, because if they're not from that community, but want to impose their narrative on it, then I think that's really problematic and difficult. But a filmmaker would be used in that process. But if you are really involved in the edit and the final cut, then I think that's a different thing. So it depends how much control you're allowed within it. Or not allowed, actually, that you just decide, and if you don't get that, then you leave, I suppose.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, negotiate and talk about those things up front. Like Basma was saying earlier, that's the only way. If you're in a situation where you're doing that kind of film with that kind of support.
There's an interesting question that a fellow filmmaker asked me about the films that I walked away from. And you don't have to answer that because obviously maybe you don't specifically want to talk about that. But I think it's a bit like how you edit a film. I think people always look at what's on the screen and they're like, wow, I can't believe you showed that. And sometimes, you're like, well, you actually don't see the bigger frame of everything that was there. This is a choice and this is a selection. And I think, what we choose to make films about is also a choice in that way. And it's like an edit, I guess. You don't necessarily see the bigger picture of everything that might have been. So I don't know if you have any comments about the films that you walked away from. You don't have to tell us what they were if you don't want to, but the notion of being able to say no, and that also being a permission that you have. And that could probably be our last question because we're running out of time.
I mean, there's nothing that juicy to share, but I have been approached to make certain films on certain subjects I just wasn't interested in. And I just straight away didn't get that far. I was just like, not for me. I don't want to be involved in creating this kind of representation about the Middle East. I mean, yeah, big surprise. But like, yeah. But I think it's good to say that and to also remind people that you're capable of doing much more than just that, because people reach out to you for, I don't know why. Like, they think, oh yeah, they speak Arabic, so they must be able to just do that kind of film. I mean, I don't know, Basma, if you've been asked to do more films about the Muslim world, or I don't know, you're like the go-to person or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely, I became the go-to person. I came, like, suddenly it was like, oh, she's Muslim and Black and Arab and Irish and Scottish because she's regional. This is great. So like I got all this like influx of like, she can speak for everyone. And I was like, no. First of all, I'm not the only Black person in the world. I'm not the only female in the world. I'm not the only Arab female Black person in the world. So I was like, I can't represent an entire nation of people. What I can do is represent my community and the people around me if they allow me to do so. I think when it comes to saying no to things, it's a big, big gut feeling, and you have to be aware that you're going to piss people off. Like, people are going to be annoyed when you say no, because they're like, well, we're giving you an opportunity. You wanted more, and here's more. And I was like, well, no, because I'm not your Muslim rep. That's not what I signed up for. Just because I made one documentary that was in a Muslim country does not mean I'm now your Muslim girl. And I actually made a point of saying the next couple of things I do, I'm going to make sure that they're not heavily Muslim influenced, just to make the point of, if an everyday white person can speak on behalf of every single country and every single religion, everything in the world, then why can't a person attached to a religion or attached to a color of their skin or attached to an ethnicity do the same? So I make a point of, even with BLM, as you said earlier, or with anything that I've done, is I diversify, so that you can come to me and say, hey, she's just a great filmmaker, not she's our Muslim, brown, Irish girl go-to. So it's, yeah, you have to say no. As brutal as it is, you have to say no to get to the yeses, that they will know, okay, we can't come to her for everything. Because the amount of emails where I'm just like, nope, not for me, not doing that. And you have to be okay with that, and be okay that they might not come to you again. I've rejected things and then never heard from people again, and I still think I'd rather stick to my guns and say no than do something and be like, didn't want to do that, but I did it because I felt like I had to. I think that's the problem. We sometimes feel like we have to do things. We don't have to do anything. We don't. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Can I just add, you said something that really pisses me off when people say like, but we're giving you an opportunity. Like, I don't need an opportunity. I just need support. Like, it's things, and yeah, anyway, you got it right.
Nope, don't want your opportunity.
Yeah. Practicing saying no has been like a real, in a way, joy actually through lockdown, even though like I have been desperate for work. I've been desperate to do my own work. Like, I don't want to do this thing that stands for everything that I'm against. Yes, you may be paying me, but nope. Or like, you want me to come and talk at this thing? Nope. Like, just like saying no, and not in an arrogant or arsey way, but in a way like, this doesn't ring to my North Star. This doesn't like, I'd rather go and work on a farm and like, which is like work that's, you know, minimum wage, but at least I'm then saving my craft for the thing that I really want to do, then waste my craft and I lose my love for it on something that I'm not passionate about.
The word no is really liberating. It's really liberating. Once you can learn to say no, you'll realize that people will just not come to you for things that you really are frustrated that you're being asked. So once I learned to say no, the yeses became even more exciting, because I was like, yes, I'm genuinely excited about this, not the fact that I've sat all day and rejected things. I'm upset that people only see me through one lens. So and that comes from everything. I the other day got asked to promote a curly hair brand from Australia, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to promote curly hair brand, can you tell me who made it, why they made it, what's their ethnicity, what's their hair type, why have they done it, who have they done it by? And they were like, oh, it's just a really beautiful white family in Australia wanted to make a hair brand. And I was like, no, ethically, on ethical terms, no, I will not do this. So find out lots of things and dig deep to find out why you're saying no before you say no. Question the people who want you to do things. Question their intentions if you're not sure if you should say yes or no, I would say. I quiz people a lot before I say anything.
Great. I think this is a really good note to end on. And I'm sitting in the dark. My neighbour started drilling again. So that's my 1 hour cue, basically. But thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation, and I feel like it could have gone on, but let's leave on this really inspiring note of knowing where to say no, so that we can save all our energy for when
we can say yes.
We say yes.
Yeah, say yes.
Exactly.
I mean it.
Yeah. Naziha, you look forward to your essay.
Yes, my essay.
I just wanted to say a yes to the curly haired directors. I think we should have.
Yeah, right. I noticed we all have curly hair. It's so fun.
Yeah,
maybe we should do our own advert. Anyway,
our own hair brand to support filmmaking.
I like where this is going. I'm not sure whether we should stop or keep going. It's no, this has been really lovely, and I hope soon we'll be able to all be in a space together. But for now, thank you so much, Yasmin, Basma, and Naziha. Thank you to the Arab British Centre, Amani, and Becky, and Reem, who's newly in the team. And yeah, lovely to see everyone, and see you all soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Elhum. That was wonderful.